Skip, what's going on with Shedeur?
Nothing good. So I don't trust the Cleveland Browns when it comes to their quarterback situation on or off the field. So they announce on game day that Shedeur has a quote-unquote back injury, yet he did go out to warm up. They watched him warm up and they disqualified him because he's got a back injury.
Hey everyone, before we dive into this absolute mess unfolding in Cleveland, I need your help. We're pushing hard to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark, and every single subscription gets us closer. If you're enjoying the content and want to see more deep dives into NFL chaos, hit that subscribe button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything to this channel. Now let's get into the madness that is the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation. Something is seriously wrong in Cleveland right now, like genuinely broken. The Browns have a quarterback controversy that shouldn't even exist. But here we are living through another chapter of Cleveland football drama. Dillon Gabriel is starting, Shedeur Sanders is sitting, and according to Pat McAfee, there's way more to this story than anyone is admitting publicly. The decision isn't about talent, it's not about performance, it's about something else entirely. And when McAfee dropped that bomb, the entire NFL world stopped and paid attention, because this is the kind of dysfunction that defines franchises for years. This decision was predetermined, political, and had nothing to do with who gives the Browns the best chance to win now. Let's be real about what we saw from Dillon Gabriel in his debut against Minnesota. The stats look decent on paper. 19 completions on 33 attempts, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. For a first start, that's not terrible. But dig deeper and you see the real story. He was 3 for 10 on passes that traveled 10 or more yards downfield. 3 for 10. That's not being conservative, that's being terrified. His QBR was 38. For context, that's barely functional quarterback play. He threw short, safe, predictable passes all game long. The Vikings defense, which came in as a top 10 unit, didn't have to respect anything downfield because Gabriel simply wasn't attempting those throws. Their cornerbacks were playing off coverage, daring him to push the ball outside the numbers or beyond 8 yards. He refused the dare. The safeties played closer to the line of scrimmage, essentially turning the field into a telephone booth, knowing that the deep ball was off the table. This is what you call a limited offense. It puts an undue burden on the run game and the defense, an absolutely unsustainable model in the modern NFL. Now, look, I'm not saying Gabriel played horribly. He didn't turn the ball over, which matters. He managed the game, kept the Browns competitive until Carson Wentz decided to be a hero in the final minutes. But managing the game isn't what Cleveland needs right now. They need someone who can elevate the game, who can make defenses actually worry about getting beat deep, who brings energy and unpredictability to an offense that's been stale for years. Gabriel played like a career backup, trying not to mess up. And that's exactly the problem, because the Browns don't have a proven starter to come back to. This is it. This is the guy they chose. They are essentially betting their season on a quarterback whose ceiling is competent game manager, and his floor is disastrously short, which is a whole other issue we need to discuss. The offensive line felt the pressure of his limitations. They knew every snap had to be perfect because Gabriel lacked the ability to extend plays with his legs or his vision. It created a noticeable tension, a hyper-cautious approach that permeates the entire unit. You could see the frustration building in their body language as the game wore on, a silent acknowledgement that their efforts were being undermined by a lack of downfield threat. Pat McAfee didn't just question the decision, he exposed it. He looked into the camera with that knowing smirk and basically said the quiet part out loud. This wasn't a football decision based purely on merit. There were other factors at play. Politics within the building, coaching staff disagreements, front office preferences, clashing with what the locker room actually wanted. McAfee has sources, good ones. And when he speaks on something like this with that level of confidence, you better believe there's truth behind it. He wasn't speculating, he was reporting something real, something that people inside the Browns organization don't want public. The rumor mill went into overdrive, not with speculation, but with confirmatory leaks from inside the facility. Assistant coaches were texting reporters, veterans were subtly nodding to friends in the media, and the picture that emerged was one of a complete organizational schism. The players who have the most to lose felt they were being sidelined for a coach's rigid, control-obsessed philosophy. Think about what that means. The Browns coaching staff wasn't unanimous on this decision. Kevin Stefanski wanted predictability and structure. He looked at Dillon Gabriel and saw a quarterback who would execute the game plan without improvising, without creating chaos, without forcing the coaching staff to adapt on the fly. That's what Stefanski values, control and precision, but apparently multiple assistant coaches saw something different in Shedeur Sanders. They saw electricity, confidence, the kind of natural playmaking ability that can't be taught, the kind of player who makes everyone around him better just by existing on the field. They see a young Patrick Mahomes, a guy who might make a mistake, but who will also make 3 impossible plays a game. They see a player whose mere presence forces the opposing defensive coordinator to rethink their entire strategy, to allocate resources in a way that opens up the rest of the offense. Stefanski, however, sees the turnover risk, the unscripted moments, and it triggers his fear of losing control. He's a coach who thrives on a clean stat sheet and a perfectly executed, if boring, drive. Shedeur Sanders isn't some unknown commodity either. This is Deion Sanders' son, a guy who played at Colorado under the brightest spotlight college football has seen in years. He handled that pressure, handled the media circus, handled opposing defenses trying to prove a point every single week. He's been groomed for this moment his entire life. His father taught him how to handle pressure, how to perform when everyone's watching, how to be the guy when the game is on the line. Those intangibles matter in the NFL, maybe more than anything else. He possesses an innate understanding of the quarterback position's power and responsibility. He carries himself like a starter, even on the bench, and that aura affects the team. The players see it, they respond to it, they know when they have a potential star, and they know when they have a guy who's just trying to survive. Right now, they're seeing the latter on the field and the former on the sideline. But Stefanski chose safe over spectacular. He chose the guy who wouldn't make waves over the guy who could create them. And Cleveland fans, they know what safe looks like. They've lived through years of safe quarterback play. They've watched their team go 6-11 playing it safe. They've seen coaches get fired for being too conservative. Safe doesn't win in Cleveland. Safe doesn't even compete in the AFC North, where you've got Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and whatever version of chaos Pittsburgh is rolling out each week. You need edge. You need risk. You need a quarterback who isn't afraid to lose if it means giving your team a chance to win big. The AFC North is a division of gunslingers and dynamic playmakers. Trying to win with a cautious check-down quarterback is like bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. You're outclassed before the coin toss. The fans remember the brief, glorious flame of Baker Mayfield's rookie year, a time when the team, even while losing, was fun to watch. They want that feeling back, and they see it in Sanders, not Gabriel. The quiet resignation of the fan base is deafening right now. They aren't angry, they're tired of the same old cycle. The locker room reportedly feels split right now. Not openly divided, but there's tension. Some players bought into the Gabriel plan because they trust the coaching staff. Others are watching Shedeur in practice, seeing what he can do, and wondering why the better player isn't getting the opportunity. That's toxic. That's the kind of environment that destroys teams before the season even starts. Veterans talk, young players pick sides, and suddenly you don't have a unified locker room anymore. You have factions, and factions lose football games. When the defensive star players, guys like Myles Garrett, have to answer questions about the offense's struggles, the tension becomes palpable. Their tired, measured responses are a clear signal of their internal frustration. They are performing at an elite level, only to see their efforts wasted by an offense that seems to operate with the handbrake on. This creates an us versus them mentality, the defense that keeps them in games versus the offense that can't finish them. McAfee's revelation changed everything because it validated what fans were already feeling. Something was off about this decision from the jump. When the Browns drafted both Gabriel and Sanders, everyone assumed there would be a real competition, training camp, preseason games, evaluation based on performance. But according to McAfee's sources, the competition was skewed from the beginning. Stefanski already knew who he wanted. Gabriel got first-team reps early, got more opportunities with the starting offense, built chemistry with the top receivers, while Shedeur worked with backups. By the time anyone outside the building started paying attention, the decision was already made. That's not fair evaluation, that's predetermined outcome disguised as competition. And when Mcaffe exposed that, Browns fans lost their minds because they've seen this movie before. They watched the organization mishandle Baker Mayfield. They watched them stick with guys too long, abandon guys too quickly, make decisions based on everything except what was actually happening on the field. This felt like history repeating itself. Another talented young quarterback getting buried because the coaching staff was uncomfortable with his style. The concept of a true meritocracy, a sacred ideal in sports, was violated. And when players and fans feel like the fix is in, the entire foundation of trust crumbles. The whispers about Stefanski's favoritism for quarterbacks who fit his system perfectly, regardless of their actual potential, grew louder. This isn't about development, it's about a coach's ego and a desire for control at the expense of winning. Here's what drives Browns fans crazy about this whole situation. Their defense is legitimately good. Myles Garrett is a monster. Their secondary can cover. Their front seven pressures quarterbacks and stops the run. This is a team that could compete right now if the offense just gave them something to work with. But instead, they're watching their quarterback dink and dunk his way through games, hoping Quentin Judkins can run for enough yards to keep drives alive, praying their defense holds every single week. That's not sustainable. Eventually, your defense breaks when the offense can't stay on the field, can't score points, can't give them any breathing room. The sheer volume of snaps the defense is being forced to play will lead to fatigue, injury, and a statistical regression that will tank the entire team. They are being asked to be perfect for 4 quarters every single Sunday because the offense operates in slow motion. The defense knows it, the fans know it, and the opposing teams know it. Defensive coordinators are licking their chops, knowing they only have to worry about a few select play calls, making their jobs incredibly simple. Dillon Gabriel's height gets brought up constantly, and honestly, it's a fair concern. He's listed at 5 feet 11 and a quarter, which probably means he's actually shorter. In the NFL, that matters. Passing lanes get congested, defensive linemen get their hands up, throwing over the middle becomes a challenge. Now, we've seen undersized quarterbacks succeed, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, but those guys had elite processing speed, incredible accuracy, and escapability that made up for their lack of height. Gabriel doesn't have that same dynamic ability. He's more pocket passer than improviser, and when you're short and stuck in the pocket, life gets difficult fast. The batted balls against the Vikings weren't bad luck. They were a predictable outcome for a shorter quarterback without elite launch angles. Every pass over the center of the field is a high-risk proposition for him, further limiting the playbook to safe sideline throws and check downs. This physical limitation is a mathematical problem that can't be coached away. Compare that to Shedeur Sanders, who isn't huge either, but plays bigger than his size. He has that confidence that makes defenses respect him differently. He'll stand in the pocket and deliver throws knowing he's about to get hit. He'll scramble when necessary, but doesn't panic. His arm talent is obvious. He can make every throw required in an NFL offense. So why is he sitting? According to Mcaffe, it's because Stefanski doesn't trust that confidence yet. He sees it as recklessness rather than courage. He'd rather have the guy who checks down than the guy who might force a throw trying to win the game. But football isn't played in a laboratory. It's not about eliminating all risk. Sometimes you need a quarterback who will take a chance, who believes he can fit that ball into a tight window, who trusts his arm even when the analytics say to punt. Joe Flacco showed that exact tendency when he was in Cleveland a couple years back. Sometimes it worked brilliantly. Sometimes he threw terrible interceptions, but at least the offense had a pulse. At least defenses had to respect the possibility of getting beat deep. With Gabriel right now, defenses are loading the box, daring him to throw it, and he's not taking that dare. The fear of failure is a powerful deterrent, and it is visibly handcuffing the entire offense. Sanders, by contrast, operates with an almost arrogant self-belief, a quality that can be frustrating for coaches but is often the defining characteristic of elite quarterbacks. He believes every throw is catchable, and that belief, that sheer audacity, is contagious. Mcaffe's comments about the front office adds another layer to this disaster. Apparently, ownership was intrigued by the idea of a Sanders era in Cleveland. The marketing potential alone would have been massive. Deion's son playing in the NFL, bringing that primetime energy to a starving fan base desperate for excitement. Jersey sales, ticket sales, media attention, all of that goes through the roof if Shedeur becomes the guy. But Stefanski operates differently. He doesn't care about marketing. He cares about execution. And in his mind, Gabriel executes the system better right now. That disconnect between ownership and coaching is dangerous. It creates pressure, undermines authority, makes players question whether decisions are being made for football reasons or business reasons. And once that doubt creeps in, it spreads fast. Players start wondering if they're part of the plan or just pawns in some larger strategy they don't understand. Chemistry breaks down, trust erodes, and suddenly you're looking at a lost season before October even arrives. The front office wants a brand, a star, a reason for people outside of Cleveland to talk about the Browns. Stefanski wants a low turnover, predictable operation that maximizes his job security. These two goals are fundamentally incompatible in the current situation, and the resulting friction is ripping the organization apart at the seams. The third down numbers from that Vikings game tell the real story. Cleveland went 0 for 4 on third downs in the fourth quarter. 0 for 4 when the game was on the line and they needed to extend drives. That's not bad luck. That's not play calling. That's a quarterback playing scared. Playing not to lose instead of playing to win. On at least one of those third downs, there was an opportunity to take a shot, to try and make something happen, to trust your arm and your receiver to execute. Gabriel didn't take it. He checked down, stayed safe, and the drive died. The game was gift-wrapped for the Vikings because the Browns' offense simply choked when it mattered most. The third down conversion rate is the heartbeat of a winning offense, and the Browns' pulse flatlined in the fourth quarter. Now, imagine Shedeur Sanders in that same situation, based on everything we know about him, based on his college tape, based on how he was raised by Deion. He's taking that shot. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but at least there's a chance. At least the defense has to respect the aggression. That's what Cleveland needs. They need someone who will try to win the game, not just avoid losing it. There's a massive difference between those two approaches, and right now, they have the wrong approach under center. The fear of failure is a greater motivator than the desire to win for the coaching staff, and that psychological paralysis is being perfectly executed by their starting quarterback. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of mediocrity. The difference between Gabriel and Sanders is the difference between a punt and a potential game-winning touchdown. It's the difference between hope and resignation. Mcaffe doubled down the next day, which tells you everything you need to know about his confidence in the information. He doesn't just throw stuff out there to create content. When he commits to a story like this, when he puts his reputation behind it, there's substance. He basically confirmed that the Browns are operating with competing philosophies right now. Some people in that building want to develop Shedeur slowly, protect him, let him learn without the pressure of starting. Others think that's a waste of time, that you learn fastest by playing, and that the team is good enough right now to compete if they just had better quarterback play. That philosophical divide is killing them. You can't develop a young quarterback properly when half the building wants him on the field and half wants him on the bench. You can't build an offense when there's no consensus on who should be running it. You can't create chemistry when players don't know who their quarterback will be 3 weeks from now. The Browns are trying to have it both ways, keeping Gabriel as the safe option while still pretending Shedeur is part of the plan. And it's satisfying nobody. The protect the asset argument for Sanders is weak when the team around him is good enough to contend now. Great teams draft and play the best available talent, letting them learn on the job. The Browns are acting like a bottom feeder team with no immediate aspirations, which is an insult to their current defensive talent. The comparison to the Baker Mayfield situation is impossible to ignore. Remember when Tyrod Taylor was the starter, then got hurt and Baker came in and immediately changed the entire energy of that team? Cleveland went from lifeless to electric in one game. The city rallied behind Baker because he brought something they hadn't seen in years. Genuine swagger and confidence at the quarterback position. Now they're watching the reverse happen. They have a guy with swagger sitting on the bench while a game manager takes snaps, and they're being told to trust the process. Browns fans don't trust processes anymore. They've been told to trust processes for 2 decades, and it's led to nothing but disappointment. They want results. They want entertainment. They want a quarterback who makes Sunday exciting instead of stressful. Gabriel might be technically sound, might understand the playbook perfectly, might never make a catastrophic mistake, but he's not exciting. He's not the guy who makes you rush home to watch the game. And in a city that's been starved of quarterback play for this long, that matters. The fan base is emotionally invested, and the current regime is treating them like they should be satisfied with a low-calorie diet of competence. This isn't just about football, it's about the soul of the franchise, which thrives on passionate, sometimes irrational belief. Week 2 of preseason apparently showed more cracks. Gabriel struggled, didn't look comfortable, and suddenly the Gabriel versus Shedeur debate intensified to levels the coaching staff couldn't ignore anymore. Practice reps started shifting. Shedeur got more time with the first team. The offense looked different, more energized, more willing to attack downfield. Players started responding differently. You could see it in body language, in effort, in execution. The team wanted Shedeur on the field, even if Stefanski wasn't ready to admit it publicly. The buzz coming out of Berea after those practices was electric, not just from the media, but from the players themselves who were openly talking about the juice Sanders brought to the huddle. They felt the potential for explosion on every snap. Gabriel's reps, by contrast, were described as sterile and rehearsed. The contrast was too stark to ignore, and the internal pressure mounted on Stefanski. And that's when things got really interesting, because the Browns tried to control the narrative but couldn't. Too many leaks, too many anonymous sources, too much smoke for there not to be fire. McAfee's initial report opened the floodgates. Suddenly, everyone with a connection to the Browns organization was talking, confirming details, adding context, painting a picture of a franchise once again torn between doing what's comfortable and doing what's right. The problem with a fractured locker room is that information flows freely to the outside. Disgruntled players or their agents become ready sources for reporters looking for the real story. The Browns' PR machine, designed to squash negative stories, was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of truth being leaked. Stefanski is in a tough spot now. If he sticks with Gabriel and the team struggles, he looks stubborn and out of touch. If he switches to Shedeur and it doesn't work immediately, he looks indecisive and reactive. There's no clean path forward, which is exactly the kind of situation that gets coaches fired. The margin for error in Cleveland is non-existent. The fans are done being patient. The front office is feeling pressure. And the roster, the actual players who have to go out there and perform, they want to win. Now, the situation is bigger than just quarterback evaluation. It's about organizational philosophy. It's about whether the Browns are willing to take risks, or if they're going to keep playing it safe and finishing 8-9 every year. It's about whether they trust their talent, or if they're going to keep coaching scared. And most importantly, it's about whether they're actually committed to building something special, or if they're content just being competitive enough to avoid total embarrassment. Stefanski's decision is a referendum on his entire coaching tenure. Is he an innovative mind or a rigid system coach who can't adapt? Pat McAfee exposed all of that with one segment on his show. He pulled back the curtain and showed everyone what's really happening in Cleveland, and it's not pretty. It's politics. It's disagreement. It's coaches protecting their jobs instead of empowering their best players. It's everything that's been wrong with this franchise for years, just in a new uniform with new faces making the same old mistakes. The Browns are an organization that seems to value internal peace and quiet more than winning, a damning indictment for a professional sports franchise. They've perfected the art of the self-sabotage, choosing the path of least resistance internally, which inevitably leads to the most resistance externally on game day. The historical precedent is so overwhelming that the fan base has developed a dark, fatalistic sense of humor about it. They know how this movie ends, and they are watching the opening scene of their inevitable tragedy play out in slow motion. The weight of this history is a burden on every coach and player, and the only way to shed it is through bold, correct decisions. The Gabriel decision was neither bold nor correct. So where does this leave Cleveland, with a quarterback situation that should have been resolved in training camp, but instead has become the defining storyline of their season before it even starts? With a fan base that's frustrated, divided, and desperate for someone to just make a decision and stick with it. With a coaching staff that's clearly not on the same page. And with a talented roster that's being wasted while everyone figures out who should be throwing them the football. The indecision is the decision, and it's a decision to lose. They've managed to turn their greatest position of leverage, a roster that should be built for the playoffs, into a weakness through organizational mismanagement. The clock is ticking not just on the season, but on Stefanski's time in Cleveland, a clock accelerated by the very public nature of this internal strife. The air of quiet desperation inside the facility is thicker than the autumn fog rolling off Lake Erie. Dillon Gabriel might be a perfectly fine quarterback. He might have a solid career as a backup, might even start games and not embarrass himself, but he's not the answer in Cleveland. Not when there's a guy sitting right there on the bench who brings everything the Browns actually need. Energy, confidence, playmaking ability, the willingness to take chances. Shedeur Sanders might not be perfect either. He might throw interceptions, might make rookie mistakes, might struggle early, but at least he'd give Cleveland something to believe in. At least he'd make the games worth watching. At least he'd inject some life into an organization that's been dead inside for way too long. The risk of playing Sanders is the risk of a turnover or two. The risk of not playing Sanders is the risk of a guaranteed soul-crushing loss of a season. The latter is a far greater sin to the fan base. They understand growing pains. They do not understand self-imposed stagnation. And that's what Pat McAfee really revealed. Not just that the Browns made the wrong decision at quarterback, but that they're still operating like a franchise afraid of its own shadow, still choosing comfort over courage, still playing not to lose instead of playing to win, still wondering why nothing ever changes. Until that changes, until someone in that building has the guts to take a real chance, Cleveland is going to keep being Cleveland. Talented, frustrated, and perpetually one decision away from finally getting it right. The specter of the Factory of Sadness is still hovering over this team, and the only exorcism is to put the best player on the field, regardless of the coaching staff's comfort level. The Browns are holding a lottery ticket worth millions, and are refusing to scratch it because they're afraid of the paper cut. And that, more than anything else, is the tragedy of Cleveland football right now. This is a story of potential squandered, of fear dictating strategy, and of the same old cycle repeating itself with a depressing, familiar rhythm. The hope for change is now pinned entirely on the moment Stefanski is forced, by injury or performance, to unleash the one quarterback who can truly save this season. The team is not just waiting for the call, it's begging for it.